The courthouse steps should have felt like freedom, but Bridget Callahan's knees buckled the moment she signed away 7 years of hell. A stranger's arms caught her before she hit the concrete, strong, unfamiliar, and carrying the scent of someone who'd been watching from a distance for far too long. What she didn't know: this wasn't rescue. This was debt collection. Her dead best friend's brother had been keeping tabs since the funeral, and now he was calling in a promise she never made. Have you ever wondered what it costs to be saved by someone who doesn't believe in salvation? Have you watched someone you love disappear into a relationship that swallowed them whole? Have you ever been that person, losing yourself one compromise at a time? Bridget spent 7 years as a ghost in designer clothes, her dreams traded for a man's ambition, her voice silenced by gaslighting and control. But what happens when freedom comes with strings attached? When the man offering escape has his own agenda? Stick with me, because this story isn't about rescue. It's about what happens when two broken people collide and neither one knows how to let go of their ghosts. Let me take you back to where Bridget's nightmare began. Long before that courthouse, before Preston, to a university dorm room in Nashville where she met the girl who would change everything. Rebecca Ashford walked into Bridget's dorm room without knocking, handed her a stolen bottle of wine, and said 5 words that would define their friendship. "You're too good for him." Bridget looked up from her photography textbook, confusion written across her face. They'd only been roommates for 3 days. This girl, with her messy blonde hair, designer boots that cost more than Bridget's tuition, and eyes that seemed to read people like books, was already making declarations about Bridget's life. "Excuse me?" "That guy, Preston." Rebecca twisted the bottle open, took a swig, passed it over. "Your TA who keeps finding excuses to lean over your desk during critique. He's trouble." The dorm room smelled like cheap candles and ambition, camera equipment scattered across Bridget's desk like promises she intended to keep. Rebecca sprawled across the unmade bed, designer boots leaving marks on thrift store sheets, studying Bridget with eyes that saw too much. "How do you even know about Preston?" Bridget asked, accepting the wine because refusing felt impossible with someone like Rebecca. "I pay attention. It's what I do." Rebecca grinned, wicked and warm. "Also, he's my cousin. Well, third cousin. Rich Southern families, everyone's related somehow. And trust me, the Whitmore boys, they collect pretty things. They don't keep them." Bridget should have listened, should have heard the warning in Rebecca's voice, the experience behind those sharp green eyes. But she was 19, fresh from Louisville, drowning in student loans, and Preston Whitmore looked at her like she was art worth studying. "Maybe he's different," Bridget said, already defensive about a man she barely knew. Rebecca sat up, suddenly serious. "Rich boys like him don't date girls like us because they respect us. They date us because we don't know the rules of their game yet." "Girls like us?" "Scholarship students, workers, people who understand what money costs." Rebecca softened. "Look, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm trying to be honest. But I'll be here when you figure that out." That was the thing about Rebecca. She told hard truths wrapped in genuine care. She became Bridget's best friend not in spite of her warnings, but because of them. Because someone finally saw Bridget as worth protecting. For 6 months, they were inseparable. Late nights editing photos while Rebecca wrote papers on art history. Weekend road trips to photograph abandoned barns and forgotten towns. Rebecca dragging Bridget to parties where she didn't belong, teaching her to navigate rooms full of people who'd never worried about money. And Preston? He circled. Patient, calculated. The first time he touched her, really touched her, was during a class critique. His hand lingered on Bridget's lower back, fingers tracing her spine through her shirt while discussing her potential, making her skin flush hot despite the air conditioning. "You have real talent," he murmured, close enough that she felt his breath. "You just need someone to help you reach it." Rebecca noticed. She always noticed. "He's grooming you," she said that night, angry in a way Bridget had never seen. "That's what they do. Make you feel special, talented, chosen, then slowly convince you that you need them. You're being paranoid. I'm being experienced." Rebecca grabbed Bridget's shoulders. "Promise me something. If you're going to ignore everything I'm saying, and I know you are because I can see it in your face, promise you won't lose yourself completely. Keep your camera. Keep your dreams. Don't let him convince you to trade your life for his." Bridget promised. She meant it when she said it, but promises break easier than hearts. By spring semester, Preston had convinced her to move in with him. By summer, he'd convinced her to take a semester off to help with his first real estate development. "Just temporary," he said, "just until we get established." Rebecca called it a mistake. They fought for the first time, words that cut deep, accusations that couldn't be taken back. "You're choosing him over your entire future. You don't understand. He loves me. He loves controlling you. There's a difference." Rebecca stormed out saying she needed space. Bridget let her go, convinced her best friend was wrong, jealous, incapable of understanding real love. Have you ever ignored a friend's warning about someone, convinced they just didn't understand? Tell me in the comments, were they right? 3 weeks after that fight, Rebecca's car hit black ice on I-40. She died instantly, and Bridget never got to say she was sorry. Bridget stood at Rebecca's funeral in a dress Preston bought, surrounded by people who knew Rebecca better than she did, drowning in guilt that felt like concrete in her lungs. The cemetery stretched gray and frozen, Nashville winter biting through expensive coats and cheap apologies. Bridget watched them lower her best friend into frozen ground, Preston's hand tight around her waist. Anchor or shackle, she couldn't tell anymore. She hadn't seen Rebecca in 3 months. 3 months of silence because Bridget had chosen Preston, chosen his version of love that required distance from anyone who questioned him. 3 months of telling herself she'd call tomorrow, next week, after the holidays. Now there were no more tomorrows. The crowd was massive. Rebecca had collected people the way others collected stamps, effortlessly, joyfully, creating connections that lasted. Bridget recognized faces from campus, from parties, from the life she'd walked away from. They all looked at her with questions she couldn't answer. Where were you? Why weren't you there? How could you let her die alone? "Stop fidgeting," Preston whispered, his grip tightening. "People are watching." They were. Bridget felt their eyes, their judgment, their grief that she had no right to share. She'd abandoned Rebecca, given up their friendship for a man who now dictated how she could mourn. That's when she saw him. Across the grave, standing apart from the crowd, was a man who looked like Rebecca, same sharp cheekbones, same green eyes, same way of seeing straight through pretense. But where Rebecca had been warm, this man radiated ice. He stared at Bridget with an intensity that made her want to hide. His gaze tracked every movement, the way she flinched when Preston's fingers dug into her side, the long sleeves covering bruises that had nothing to do with clumsiness, the careful blankness she'd learned to wear like armor. Dominic Ashford, Rebecca's older brother. Bridget knew him only from stories, the brilliant, driven sibling who'd left Nashville for Atlanta, building tech companies while Rebecca studied art. Rebecca had worshipped him, worried about him, wished he'd slow down and live instead of just achieving. "Rebecca talked about you constantly," an elderly woman said, appearing at Bridget's side. Elegant, expensive, kind eyes behind designer glasses. "You must be Bridget." "Yes, ma'am. Eleanor Ashford, Rebecca's grandmother." She pressed a business card into Bridget's palm, her touch warm and brief. "If you ever need anything, she won't." Dominic's voice cut across them, cold as the frozen ground. He'd moved without sound, suddenly close enough to see the red rimming his eyes, the exhaustion carved into his features. She made her choice. The words landed like a slap. Bridget opened her mouth to respond, to apologize, to explain the inexplicable, but nothing came. Preston pulled her away. "We should go. You're getting upset." She wasn't the one who was upset. She was numb. But Preston needed her to be fragile, needed to play the protective boyfriend in front of Nashville's elite, needed the performance more than he needed her truth. As they walked to the car, Bridget looked back. Dominic stood alone at the grave, his profile sharp against tinted windows of a black Mercedes. His hands were clenched, his jaw tight, his entire body radiating controlled fury. She didn't know he'd just made himself a promise. Honor Rebecca's memory by keeping Bridget safe, even if it meant watching from a distance, even if it meant hating her for choosing wrong. Have you ever carried guilt for a friendship that ended before you could fix it? Drop a heart if you understand that weight. As mourners dispersed, Bridget watched Dominic climb into that black Mercedes, his profile sharp against tinted windows. She felt the weight of his judgment, the burden of his blame, the ghost of Rebecca's warnings echoing in the frozen air. She didn't know that Dominic had listened to every voicemail Rebecca left him that final afternoon. 3 calls. 3 chances to answer. 3 opportunities he'd ignored because he was in meetings, building empires, prioritizing everything except the sister who needed him. She didn't know that his guilt rivaled her own. She didn't know that he'd spend the next 8 years watching her disappear into Preston's control, documenting every bruise, every public humiliation, every slow death of the woman Rebecca loved. She didn't know that he was waiting for her to be ready, waiting for his chance to honor his sister's memory by saving the friend she couldn't, waiting to collect on a debt Bridget never knew she owed. Preston didn't destroy Bridget overnight. He dismantled her brick by brick, smile by smile, until she couldn't remember what her own voice sounded like. Their Belmead mansion gleamed with southern charm, white columns and manicured lawns hiding rooms where Bridget learned to make herself smaller, quieter, less. Her camera equipment gathered dust in the attic, one more dream Preston convinced her to sacrifice for his empire. The first year was adjustments. "We'll get you back to school soon," he promised. "Just need to establish the business first." The second year was isolation. Friends stopped calling when Bridget never answered. Her phone became Preston's to monitor, her schedule his to control, her world shrinking to the exact size he permitted. The third year was when she caught him, his secretary, against his desk. The same desk where he'd made love to Bridget that morning, whispering promises about forever. "You're overreacting," he said when confronted. "It meant nothing. You're being emotional, hysterical. Maybe you should see someone about these paranoid delusions." Gaslighting, she'd learn later, making her question her own eyes, her own sanity, her own worth. The fourth year, her mother died. Cancer. Fast and brutal. Preston allowed 3 days for the funeral, then demanded she get back to normal. "Grief is self-indulgent," he explained. "Your mother wouldn't want you wallowing." The fifth year, he destroyed her portfolio during an argument she couldn't remember starting, ripped photographs she'd spent years collecting, images of her dreams scattered across marble floors like evidence of a crime. "You don't need these anymore," he said, calm after the storm. "You have me. Isn't that enough?" It wasn't. But admitting that felt dangerous. The 6th year was survival. Bridget learned to read his moods, predict his anger, smooth over conflicts before they ignited. She became an expert at apologizing for things she didn't do, accepting blame for his affairs, making herself responsible for his happiness. She also learned to hide money. Wedding photography. Small gigs she booked through old contacts, jobs she worked while Preston thought she was shopping or getting her nails done. $20 here, $50 there, building a secret account that felt like the only thing she still owned. If you've ever felt trapped in a life you didn't recognize, If you've watched yourself disappear, you're not alone. Share your story of finding your way back. The 7th year started with hope disguised as routine. June 2023. Bridget photographed a wedding where the bride said her vows with such conviction it cracked something inside Bridget's chest. Not the words themselves, though "I choose you freely" completely joyfully landed like an indictment, but the way the bride looked at her groom, like he saw her, really saw her, like she didn't have to perform or shrink or apologize for existing, like love was supposed to be easy. That night, alone in the mansion's massive bed while Preston worked late, or claimed to, Bridget did something she'd been too afraid to do for years. She called a divorce lawyer. "I need out," she whispered into the phone, voice shaking. "But I don't have much money, just what I've saved. Is it enough?" The lawyer was kind, professional, honest about the costs, the timeline, the fight ahead. "He'll make this ugly," she warned. "Men like Preston don't let go easily. Are you prepared for that?" No, but she was more prepared to leave than to stay. Let's start the paperwork. What Bridget didn't know, the secret bank account she'd been building, the one that gave her just enough courage to make that call, had been quietly supplemented by an anonymous donor for the past 2 years. What she didn't know, Dominic Ashford had been tracking her finances, her movements, her declining health, waiting for the exact moment when she'd be ready to run. What she didn't know, he'd been preparing for this moment since Rebecca's funeral, building evidence, documenting crimes, creating an escape route for the woman his sister loved. He was ready. He'd been ready for 8 years. Now, finally, so was she. Preston Whitmore didn't fight the divorce because he loved Bridget. He fought it because losing meant admitting he'd never owned her in the first place. July 2023. The divorce filing hit Preston's desk like a declaration of war. Bridget had moved out the day before, taking nothing but clothes and her camera, leaving behind 7 years of accumulated life like she was fleeing a burning building. Because she was. The law offices smelled like leather and old money. Conference tables polished to mirrors that reflected Bridget's face. Thinner than before, older, but eyes finally clear. Across from her, Preston's lawyer shuffled papers like weapons while Preston himself watched her with the cold assessment of someone calculating damages. "You'll regret this," he said during their first mediation. Not angry, calm. Which somehow made it worse. "I made you. Without me, you're nothing." Her lawyer, a fierce woman named Janet Rodriguez, who'd appeared seemingly out of nowhere, claiming she worked on contingency, placed a hand on Bridget's arm, a reminder to stay quiet, to let the professionals handle him. But Bridget was done being quiet. "You didn't make me. You broke me. There's a difference." Preston's smile was terrible. "Prove it." He did everything to prove she couldn't, filed motions claiming she was mentally unstable, brought in witnesses, his friends, his family, people who'd never seen what happened behind closed doors, who testified that Bridget was paranoid, delusional, unbalanced. "She's always been jealous," his secretary said under oath, the same woman Bridget caught him with. Accused Mr. Whitmore of affairs that never happened, made scenes. Honestly, I worried for his safety. The judge looked skeptical but reserved. These cases were always he said, she said, always difficult to prove. Then Janet played the recordings. Bridget didn't know where they came from, didn't recognize the device that captured them, but there was Preston's voice, clear as day, threatening her after she questioned his late nights. "You think you can leave? Who'd want you? You're damaged, used up. I'm the best thing that ever happened to you, and you're too stupid to realize it." There were photos, too. Bruises on her arms, her ribs, her thighs. Medical records from an ER visit where she'd lied about falling downstairs. Financial documents proving Preston had drained their joint account the moment she filed, leaving her with nothing. "Where did you get these?" Bridget whispered to Janet during a recess. Janet's smile was mysterious. Let's just say you have friends you don't know about yet. The tide turned, slowly, then suddenly. Preston's mistress, one of several it turned out, came forward reluctantly, pressured by evidence she couldn't deny. She testified about the affairs, the manipulation, the way Preston talked about Bridget like she was property to manage. His business partner revealed financial fraud in their real estate deals, transactions that implicated Preston in schemes Bridget knew nothing about. Character witnesses appeared, neighbors who'd heard arguments, colleagues who'd seen bruises, service workers who'd watched Bridget shrink over the years. The judge's skepticism turned to disgust. Mr. Whitmore, I'm granting Mrs. Callahan her divorce. Furthermore, I'm issuing a restraining order. You are not to contact her, approach her, or make any attempt to communicate. Do you understand? Preston's jaw clenched. His lawyer whispered urgently, but Preston shook him off. This isn't over, he said, staring at Bridget. Not a threat, a promise. What would you tell someone trapped in a relationship where love became control? What kept you fighting when leaving felt impossible? The morning of the final hearing, October 2023, Bridget received an anonymous envelope at her temporary apartment. Inside, photographs documenting Preston's affairs, financial records proving his fraud, and a note in unfamiliar handwriting. Rebecca would be proud. Bridget stared at those words, tears blurring her vision. Someone had been watching, someone had been helping, someone had cared enough to build her an escape route brick by careful brick. She had no idea her guardian angel had a face, a name, and an agenda that had nothing to do with kindness. She had no idea that in less than 12 hours, she'd collapse on courthouse steps and he'd finally step out of the shadows. She had no idea that her freedom was about to become his cage, or that maybe, just maybe, they'd both been prisoners all along. Freedom weighs more than chains. Bridget learned that truth the moment her legs gave out on courthouse steps and a stranger's arms became her cage. Davidson County Courthouse steps blazed white-hot under Tennessee sun, tourists snapping photos of historic architecture while Bridget's world tilted sideways. The papers in her hand, decree absolute, 7 years dissolved into legal language, suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. Her knees buckled. She would have hit concrete, split her head open, added physical scars to match the emotional ones, but arms caught her. Strong, unfamiliar, steady. I've got you. The voice was deep, controlled, carrying an accent that spoke of money and education and control. Bridget's vision swam, black spots dancing across the bright October sky, her body finally giving in to 7 years of stress and survival. She should have been afraid, should have fought, should have remembered that men who caught you weren't always saving you. But she was so tired. Just breathe, the voice commanded. Not unkind, but not exactly kind either. When's the last time you ate? Bridget couldn't remember. Yesterday? The day before? Food had seemed irrelevant when every calorie felt like Preston still controlled her. We're going to my car. Can you walk? She nodded, tried, failed. The stranger, because she still hadn't seen his face, hadn't processed anything beyond the sensation of being held, lifted her. Actually, lifted her. Bridget felt herself pressed against a chest that smelled like expensive cologne and something else. Something almost familiar. Who? She tried to ask. Dominic Ashford, Rebecca's brother. The name hit like cold water. Rebecca. The funeral. The man who'd stared at her across frozen ground with judgment and rage. Let me go, she managed, struggling weakly. No. His grip tightened, not painful, but immovable. You're about to pass out in front of a dozen witnesses, and Preston's lawyer is watching from across the street. So either I take you somewhere safe, or you collapse here and give them ammunition to prove you're unstable. Choose. Bridget went still, hated that he was right, hated more that she had no energy to fight. The car was a Mercedes, black, expensive. The leather seats were cool against her overheated skin. The air conditioning a shock after Tennessee heat. Dominic moved around to the driver's side with efficient grace, making calls on his phone before they'd even left the parking lot. I need a medical consult standing by. No, not an ER, too public. My place in Atlanta, yes. How soon can you get there? Atlanta. He was taking her to Atlanta. I didn't agree to this, Bridget said, but her voice sounded far away even to her own ears. Dominic glanced at her, those green eyes, so like Rebecca's but harder, colder, assessing her condition with clinical precision. You didn't agree to a lot of things. Doesn't mean they didn't happen. The drive was a blur. Bridget drifted in and out of consciousness, vaguely aware of highway signs, of crossing state lines, of Nashville disappearing in the rearview mirror like the life she'd just escaped. When she woke fully, they were pulling into an underground garage, sleek, modern, nothing like Preston's Belmead mansion with its antebellum pretensions. Where are we? My penthouse, Atlanta. You've been out for 3 hours. 3 hours. She'd slept in a stranger's car for 3 hours. Rebecca's brother or not, this was insane. Dominic parked, came around, opened her door with the same efficient grace. He didn't try to lift her this time, just offered his hand. Can you walk? Bridget took his hand, partly because she wasn't sure she could, partly because some instinct said refusing would be worse. His palm was warm, calloused despite the expensive suit, and his grip steadied her when she swayed. The elevator ride was silent. Long. They rose 50 floors, the city appearing below them like a world Bridget no longer belonged to. The penthouse doors opened directly into his apartment. Glass and steel, floor-to-ceiling windows framing Atlanta's skyline. Everything clean and modern and utterly impersonal. Nothing like Preston's mansion. Nothing like anywhere Bridget had ever been. Sit, Dominic commanded, gesturing to a sofa that probably cost more than her car. Bridget sat, mostly because standing required energy she didn't have. You'll stay here until you're stable. I don't even know you. Dominic's smile was sharp, humorless. I'm Rebecca's brother. That's all you need to know. Rebecca never mentioned. She mentioned you constantly. He cut her off, moving to pour water from a filtered pitcher, handing her the glass like it was medicine she had to take. Called you her soul twin, said you were smart, talented, wasting yourself on a man who didn't deserve you. She was right about all of it. Bridget drank because her throat was desert dry, because arguing required strength she'd spent on the divorce, because this man radiated control in a way that made Preston look like an amateur. So here's the deal. Dominic sat across from her, posture relaxed but eyes intense. I need a fiancé for 3 months to secure my inheritance. Family will, archaic requirements, not important. You need protection from Preston and time to rebuild. Marry me on paper, and I'll give you everything Rebecca wanted for you. Freedom, safety, your photography career back. The words didn't make sense. Bridget stared at him, trying to process. You want me to marry you? On paper. Business arrangement. We have separate rooms, separate lives, but publicly we're engaged. 3 months. After that, you get $500,000 and your life back. I get controlling shares of my company. Everyone wins. This is insane. Is it? Dominic leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes boring into hers. You just spent 7 years in hell. You have maybe $5,000 saved, no job, no support system, and an ex-husband who's already talking about appeals. How long do you think you'll last fighting him alone? Bridget opened her mouth, closed it. Because he was right. About all of it. Would you accept help from a stranger if it meant escape? What price would you pay for a second chance? Why? She finally asked. Why help me? You don't even like me. I saw it at the funeral. Something flickered across Dominic's face. Pain, guilt, rage, gone so fast Bridget almost missed it. I made Rebecca a promise that I'd look after the people she loved. I failed her once. I won't fail her again. The honesty in his voice surprised her, the rawness beneath his control. When do we start? She heard herself ask. Dominic's smile didn't reach his eyes. Cold, calculated, victorious. We already have. Preston's lawyer just received our engagement announcement. Bridget should have asked why he'd been watching, why Rebecca never mentioned having a brother, why his eyes held such carefully controlled rage. She should have demanded answers, set boundaries, protected the fragments of self she'd just reclaimed. Instead, she felt the courthouse steps beneath her knees again, felt the weight of 7 years pressing down, felt the exhaustion of fighting alone. Okay, she whispered. Dominic nodded once, satisfied. Like she'd just signed a contract he'd been preparing for years. Because she had. She just didn't know it yet. The contract had 17 clauses about public appearances and none about falling in love. Dominic should have added one, because the moment Bridget touched Rebecca's old camera, something shifted. Morning came too bright through floor-to-ceiling windows. Bridget woke in a guest room that felt like a hotel, expensive, impersonal, untouched by actual living. For a moment, panic seized her. Where was she? Whose house? Had Preston found her? Then memory crashed back. Atlanta. Dominic. The insane proposal. She found him in the kitchen, already dressed for work despite the early hour. Suit perfectly tailored, coffee in hand, laptop open on the counter. He looked up when she entered, those green eyes assessing her like a problem to solve. You look better. Eat. He gestured to a spread of breakfast foods, eggs, toast, fruit, more than one person could possibly need. Bridget took toast because it was easiest, because sitting across from this stranger who'd hijacked her life felt surreal enough without adding scrambled eggs. We need to discuss terms, Dominic said, sliding a folder across the marble counter. The contract was thick, legal, terrifyingly thorough. 3-month engagement minimum, public appearances as a loving couple, separate bedrooms, no intimacy clause. Bridget keeps the engagement ring regardless. $500,000 when it ends, full funding for a photography studio. This is... Bridget flipped through pages, trying to process. This is a lot of money. It's fair compensation for your time. Why do you need this? You're clearly successful. Can't you just refuse the will terms? Dominic's jaw tightened. My grandmother controls 60% of Ashford Industries. Without it, I lose the company I built. She's old-fashioned, believes marriage provides stability. She amended her will 3 years ago with a deadline. Be engaged or married by my 35th birthday, or the shares go to charity. When's your birthday? January 15th, 3 months from now. Bridget did the math. He'd planned this, been waiting for her divorce to finalize, timing it perfectly. How long have you been watching me? Since Rebecca's funeral, 8 years. No hesitation, no shame, just fact. That's... Bridget searched for words. That's stalking. That's protection. There's a difference. Is there? Because this feels like another cage with better furniture. Dominic's expression didn't change. Then leave. Doors unlocked. But Preston's already filing appeals, and your savings won't last a month fighting him. So what's it going to be? My cage or his? Bridget hated him for being right. Hated more that she had no choice. I want to see Rebecca's things. That got a reaction, surprise flickering across his controlled features. Why? Because you said she talked about me. I want to know what she said. I want... Bridget's voice cracked. I want to remember her through something other than my guilt. Dominic stood, silent for a long moment. then nodded once. "Follow me." Dominic's penthouse stretched 50 floors above Atlanta. Floor-to-ceiling windows framing the city like a photograph Bridget would never take. Everything gleamed chrome and minimalism, except one door Dominic opened with reverent hands, revealing Rebecca's room frozen in time. Bridget's breath caught. It was a museum, a shrine, Rebecca's college posters still on the walls, her desk exactly as she'd left it, covered in art history books and coffee-stained notebooks, her closet full of clothes that would never be worn again. And there, on the desk, sat Rebecca's camera, the Nikon she'd sworn she'd will to Bridget someday. "I couldn't throw anything away," Dominic said quietly. "After she died, I had everything packed from her apartment. Brought it here. Sometimes I sit in here and—" He stopped, cleared his throat. "It's pathological, I know." Bridget moved to the desk, fingers trailing over books, photographs, the camera that represented everything she'd lost. Her vision blurred with tears. "She was mad at me when she died. We fought about Preston. She told me I was making a mistake, and I told her she didn't understand real love." Bridget picked up the camera, heavy and familiar in her hands. "She was right. About everything. I know. How?" Dominic crossed to a drawer, pulled out a leather journal. Rebecca's handwriting covered the front. Messy, enthusiastic, so perfectly her it hurt. "She kept journals, wrote in them constantly. The last entry is 3 days before the accident." He handed it to Bridget. "Read it." Bridget opened to the marked page, Rebecca's voice leaping off the paper. "Bridget won't return my calls. It's been 2 weeks since our fight, and I'm terrified I pushed too hard." "But how do you watch someone you love disappear and say nothing? Preston is destroying her. I see it in the rare photos she posts. The way she's shrinking, the light going out behind her eyes. Dom says I should let her make her own mistakes. But what if this mistake kills her? What if I lose my best friend because I wasn't brave enough to fight for her?" Tears streamed down Bridget's face. "I didn't know. I thought she hated me. She loved you. That was the problem." Dominic's voice was rough. "She called me that afternoon. 3 times. Wanted advice about reaching out to you again. I was in back-to-back meetings, ignored them, figured I'd call her back later." The confession hung between them. 2 people destroyed by the same loss, carrying different versions of guilt. "It wasn't your fault," Bridget whispered. "Wasn't it? If I'd answered, maybe she wouldn't have been on that road. Maybe she'd have been talking to me instead of distracted. Maybe isn't real. What's real is that she's gone, and we're still here, and we both have to figure out how to live with that. Have you ever accepted help that felt like it came with invisible strings? How did you navigate gratitude mixed with resentment?" Dominic met her eyes. For the first time, his control cracked. Grief poured through the gaps, raw, unprocessed, 8 years of holding it together falling apart in his dead sister's preserved room. "I promised her I'd look after you. That last voicemail. She said, if anything happens to me, make sure Bridget's okay. She's stronger than she knows, but she needs someone to remind her." His voice broke. "So that's what I'm doing. Reminding you." Bridget moved without thinking. Crossed the room, put her arms around this stranger who wasn't quite a stranger anymore. Dominic stiffened, then collapsed into the embrace, his face buried in her shoulder, body shaking with suppressed sobs. They stood like that for a long time. 2 broken people holding each other up in a dead girl's room, grief finally finding company. When they pulled apart, Dominic wiped his face roughly, embarrassed. "We should discuss the contract." But something had shifted. The walls between them developed cracks. That night, sleeping in Rebecca's bed, surrounded by her things, Bridget dreamed of her friend whispering, "He's not Preston, but he's not free either." She signed the contract with Rebecca's pen the next morning, her dead friend's handwriting visible on pages beneath. advice about trusting your gut. But her gut was screaming contradictions. Run from Dominic's intensity, lean into his protection, fear his control, crave his attention. She ignored all of it and signed anyway. Their first public appearance was supposed to be performance. Smile for cameras, sell the lie, go home to separate corners. No one warned them that pretending feels real when you're both starving for connection. The Georgian Terrace ballroom glittered with old money and older secrets, crystal chandeliers casting prismatic light across faces Bridget recognized from Preston's world. Her borrowed Valentino gown hugged curves she'd forgotten she had, Dominic's hand burning through silk at her waist as they navigated sharks in evening wear. "Relax," he murmured against her ear, voice low enough only she could hear. "You look like you're facing a firing squad." "I feel like I am. These people can smell fear. Chin up. You're with me now. That means something here." It did. Bridget felt eyes tracking their entrance, whispers following their path. Dominic Ashford rarely attended these events. His appearance with an unknown woman on his arm was blood in the water. "Dominic, darling." A woman in diamonds that could fund a small country descended on them. "We heard rumors you'd finally been caught. Who is this creature?" "Bridget Callahan, my fiancée." Dominic's hand tightened possessively. "Bridget, this is Margaret Hayworth. She runs half of Atlanta's charity circuit and all of its gossip." Margaret's smile was sharp. "Callahan, that name sounds familiar. Weren't you married to Preston Whitmore?" The question landed like a trap. Bridget felt Dominic stiffen beside her, ready to intervene, but she found her voice first. "I was. Now I'm not. Funny how that works." Margaret laughed, delighted. "Oh, I like her. She's got spine. You'll need it, dear, dealing with this one. He's brilliant but ruthless. Ask anyone who's tried to merge with Ashford Industries." They moved through the crowd, Dominic introducing her to business partners, family friends, society fixtures. Each conversation felt like a test Bridget was somehow passing, her natural warmth and sharp wit surprising even herself. Maybe Preston had been wrong. Maybe she wasn't useless in these spaces. Maybe she'd just never had permission to be herself. Then she saw him. Preston, across the ballroom, watching her with those cold eyes she knew too well. Her step faltered. Dominic noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" "Preston's here." Dominic's entire demeanor changed. The polished businessman disappeared, replaced by something dangerous. "Where?" "Near the bar, don't—" But Dominic was already moving, cutting through the crowd with predatory grace, pulling Bridget with him. They reached the bar together, forming a united front. Preston smiled. That terrible, calm smile that meant violence in private. "Bridget, you look well. Interesting how quickly you moved on. Almost like you planned this. Interesting how you think she needs your permission to live." Dominic's voice was ice. "Walk away before I make you." "Who even are you?" "Her future. You're her past. Know the difference." Preston's smile hardened. "You have no idea what you're getting into. She's damaged goods, high maintenance, paranoid." "Good luck with that." Bridget felt the words hit like they always did. Preston's voice in her head telling her she was worthless, broken, unlovable. But before she could spiral, Dominic moved. He didn't hit Preston, didn't make a scene, just stepped into his space with casual confidence that made Preston back up. "Let me be clear. You speak to her again, you look at her again, you breathe in her direction, I will destroy you. Not quickly, slowly. I'll start with your real estate holdings, move to your business licenses, and finish with criminal charges for fraud I've been documenting for 2 years. Test me." Preston paled. "You're bluffing." "Am I? Ask your lawyer about the missing funds from the Belmont development, or the forged permits on the Green Hills project. Go ahead. I'll wait." The color drained from Preston's face. He looked between them, calculation warring with rage, then turned and disappeared into the crowd. Bridget was shaking. Dominic's hand found hers, steady and warm. "You okay? You really have evidence against him?" "I have everything. Been building a file since the day I started watching you. Insurance policy in case he ever tried to hurt you again." Dominic's jaw was tight. "He touches you, he's done." The protectiveness should have felt like control, should have reminded her of Preston's jealous rages. But this was different. Dominic wasn't trying to own her. He was trying to free her. "Dance with me," she said impulsively. Dominic blinked. "What?" "We're engaged. We should dance. Isn't that what people expect?" Something softened in his expression. "I suppose it is." The orchestra was playing something slow and romantic. Dominic led her to the dance floor, one hand at her waist, the other holding hers, bodies close enough to feel heat through expensive fabric. "You're full of surprises," he said as they moved together. "So are you." They danced in silence, the ballroom fading around them. Bridget became acutely aware of everywhere they touched, his hand spanning her lower back, her fingers resting on his shoulder, their bodies remembering rhythms their minds denied. When he dipped her, time stopped. His face inches from hers, eyes dark and intense, both breathing too fast for a simple waltz. The audience watching their love story unfold, neither admitting it, stopped being performance sometime between the second and third verse. Have you ever pretended something so convincingly you forgot what was real? When did the mask become your face? The music ended. Applause rippled through the ballroom, but neither moved, caught in the space between pretend and real. "Bridget, don't!" She stepped back, breaking the spell. "We should go. I'm tired." Dominic's expression shuddered. Back to control. "Of course." In the car home, silence stretched heavy between them. Bridget stared out the window at Atlanta lights bleeding past, trying to ignore the heat still radiating from where Dominic had touched her. Her hand found his on the seat between them without permission, fingers intertwining like they'd done it 1,000 times before. At a red light, he turned to her, eyes molten. "That wasn't in the contract." She met his gaze, pulse racing. "No, it wasn't." The light turned green. Neither moved until horns blared behind them, shattering whatever moment they'd stumbled into. Dominic drove home in silence, but his hand never left hers. Dominic built his empire on control, his emotions on lockdown, his life on routines that kept grief at bay, until Bridget started rearranging his furniture and asking questions he'd spent 8 years avoiding. Days bled into routine. Bridget moved through the penthouse like a ghost, learning to be solid again. She cooked breakfast even though Dominic had a service for that. Rearranged furniture to let in more light. Filled vases with flowers from the farmer's market because empty spaces felt too much like her marriage. Dominic pretended not to notice, but he did. He noticed everything. The way she sang off-key in the shower, how she organized his books by color instead of author, which should have annoyed him, but somehow didn't. The photos appearing on his refrigerator, shots she took of Atlanta, of strangers, of moments that mattered to no one but her. She was making his sterile penthouse feel like a home. He didn't know how to feel about that. Atlanta nights painted the penthouse in amber light, the city breathing below while Bridget edited photos at Rebecca's old desk, Dominic supposedly working in his office but actually watching her through the reflection in his monitor. The concentration on her face, the way she bit her lip. The artist Rebecca loved emerging from Preston's shadow. "You're staring again?" Bridget said without looking up. Dominic closed his laptop. No point pretending. "You're good. The photography. Really good." "Thanks. Rebecca taught me to see light differently. She said most people look at the world. Photographers look into it." That sounds like her. Bridget saved her work, swiveled to face him. Tell me about her, the real her, not the perfect version everyone mentions at funerals. What do you want to know? Everything, the stuff that made her human. Dominic leaned back, surprised by the question, by how much he wanted to answer it. She was terrible with money, brilliant at art history, complete disaster at budgeting. I'd get calls from her at college. Dom, I spent my food money on concert tickets. Can you transfer some cash? Every month, like clockwork. Bridget smiled. She once bought a vintage camera instead of paying rent. I covered her half that month. She collected people. Anyone who seemed lonely, she'd adopt them. Our house was always full of her strays, international students homesick for their countries, freshmen struggling to adjust, anyone who needed family. She did the same at Vanderbilt. Our dorm room was basically a community center. They traded stories late into the night. Rebecca alive between them, no longer just grief but memory, full and flawed and real. I wasn't there when she crashed, Dominic finally said, voice raw. She called me 3 times that afternoon. I was in meetings, ignored them, figured I'd call her back later. Bridget moved to the couch beside him, not touching, just close. She wouldn't want this. You punishing yourself forever. How do you know what she'd want? Because her journal says so. 23 entries about how she wished you'd forgive yourself for not being perfect. Dominic turned, eyes devastated. You read all of them? Every word. She loved you, Dominic. She worried about you working too hard, caring too much, carrying responsibility for everyone. She wanted you to be happy. Not successful. Happy. I don't know the difference anymore. Maybe that's something we both need to learn. The moment stretched. Fragile, honest, dangerous. Then Dominic's phone rang. Business emergency. He took the call, voice shifting back to CEO mode, the vulnerability shuddering away. But Bridget had seen it, the real person under the control. And she wanted to see more. 2 a.m. found them both in the kitchen, sleepless for different reasons. Dominic shirtless in sweatpants, Bridget in his t-shirt she'd borrowed 3 days ago and kept forgetting to return. The galley was narrow. When they both reached for the same glass, bodies pressed together, his bare chest against her back, her breath catching, his hand settling instinctively on her hip. Time stopped. Bridget turned slowly. His hand didn't move. Her palm found his chest, feeling his heartbeat sprint beneath her fingers. We shouldn't, she whispered. No, he agreed, but his other hand came up to cup her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. The contract doesn't cover this. What is this? I don't know. His forehead rested against hers, both breathing too fast, neither pulling away. But I can't stop thinking about it. Bridget rose on her toes, almost close enough to kiss, almost brave enough to cross that line. His phone rang again. The spell shattered. Dominic stepped back, grabbed his phone, left her gasping against the counter while he took another call that couldn't wait. When he returned 20 minutes later, Bridget was gone. Back to her room. Door closed. He stood in the empty kitchen, her warmth still lingering on his skin, wondering when protection became something else entirely. What walls have you built to protect yourself? What would it take for someone to see through them? The next morning, Dominic's grandmother appeared unannounced. Eleanor Ashford swept into the penthouse like she owned it, which technically she did, assessing everything with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She found Bridget in the kitchen making coffee, wearing yesterday's clothes and Dominic's t-shirt. So you're the girl, Eleanor said without preamble. Bridget nearly dropped the coffee pot. Mrs. Ashford, I didn't know you were coming. That was intentional. I prefer catching people unaware. They're more honest. She settled on a bar stool, commanding despite her small frame. Rebecca talked about you constantly, said you were the sister she chose. Tears pricked Bridget's eyes. She was my best friend. And yet you disappeared into a bad marriage while she worried herself sick. The accusation stung because it was true. I know. I can't take that back. No, you can't. Eleanor's expression softened slightly. But you left eventually. That takes courage, especially for someone like you. Someone like me? Someone taught that leaving means failure, that enduring abuse is strength, that asking for help is weakness. Eleanor studied her. My grandson is doing that thing he does, fixing instead of feeling. I don't understand. Don't you? This arrangement, the contract, the 3-month timeline, it's all very logical, very controlled, very Dominic. He's been doing the same thing since Rebecca died. Work, deals, numbers, anything to avoid the fact that he's terrified of losing someone else. Bridget sank onto a stool. We have an agreement. That girl in there? Eleanor gestured toward Rebecca's room. She's already under your skin. I see it. The way you moved her furniture, used her desk, wear her brother's clothes. Her smile was knowing. You're nesting, dear. That's not performance. It's complicated. Love usually is. This isn't love. It's business. Eleanor laughed, delighted and disbelieving. Keep telling yourself that. But I've been alive 83 years. I know the difference between arrangement and attachment. So do you. Dominic appeared, dressed for work, tension radiating off him. Gran, this is unexpected. I wanted to meet your fiancée properly. She's lovely. Rebecca would approve. Something passed between grandmother and grandson. A conversation without words. I need to get to the office, Dominic said, grabbing his briefcase. Bridget, we have that dinner thing tonight. Be ready by 7. He left without looking at her, running from whatever almost happened in the kitchen. Eleanor watched him go, then turned to Bridget. He's his father's son. Same fear, same walls, same stupidity thinking control prevents pain. That girl in there? She's already under his skin, too. Question is, what are you going to do about it? Nothing. We have a contract. Contracts can be renegotiated. Eleanor stood, patted Bridget's hand. Rebecca's journal, page 47. She wrote about what real love looks like. Read it, then decide if you're brave enough to want it. She left as suddenly as she'd arrived, leaving Bridget alone with coffee going cold and questions she wasn't ready to answer. That night, Bridget found Dominic on the balcony, city lights spread below, shoulders tight with stress. She didn't announce herself, just stood beside him, sharing silence. My grandmother thinks I'm using you to avoid dealing with Rebecca's death, he finally said. Are you? Yes. The honesty surprised them both. But that doesn't make this fake. What is this? Dominic turned, eyes searching hers. I don't know. But it's not what I planned. You were supposed to be a solution. A way to honor Rebecca and secure my company. Simple. And now? Now you're rearranging my furniture and cooking breakfast and sleeping in Rebecca's room and I can't... He stopped, started again. I can't remember what this place felt like before you were in it. Bridget's heart hammered. The contract says 3 months. I know. Then what happens after? I don't know that either. They stood there, questions between them, neither brave enough yet to admit the truth. That somewhere between courthouse steps and midnight conversations, between Rebecca's ghost and shared grief, between contract and reality, something real had started growing, and neither knew how to stop it. Some bridges you cross slowly, testing each plank. Others you run across in the dark, consequences be damned. Bridget and Dominic sprinted. Rain hammered Atlanta like judgment, thunder shaking the penthouse windows. Bridget couldn't sleep. The storm outside matched the one building inside her. Weeks of tension, almost moments, touches that lasted too long, looks that meant too much. She found Dominic in Rebecca's room, surrounded by journals, reading by lamplight. "Can't sleep either?" she asked from the doorway. He looked up, exhausted and raw. "I keep reading these, trying to find answers, trying to understand what she'd want me to do." "About what?" "You. This. Us." He held up a journal, page marked. She wrote about relationships, about how most people confuse intensity with love, control with care, about how real connection feels quiet, safe. Bridget entered, sitting beside him on the floor. "What page?" 47. "My grandmother told you to read it, didn't she?" "She did." Dominic handed her the journal. Rebecca's voice leapt off the page. "Real love doesn't feel like drowning. It feels like learning to breathe underwater. It's not about needing someone to survive. It's about choosing them when survival is already guaranteed. It's not rescue. It's recognition. Seeing someone completely and saying, yes, that, all of it, instead of, I can fix this." Tears streamed down Bridget's face. She understood things most people spend lifetimes not learning. She understood you. That's why she worried. Dominic's voice cracked. These entries toward the end. She knew Preston was dangerous. She wanted to intervene but didn't know how without pushing you further away. They sat reading together, entries spanning college years to Rebecca's final week. Her voice alive in purple ink and terrible handwriting. Each page turned revealed the sister Dominic grieved and the friend Bridget lost, both present in the space between them. "I miss her," Bridget whispered. "So do I. I'm sorry I wasn't there. Sorry I chose wrong. Sorry I let our friendship die because I was too stubborn to hear the truth." Dominic set down the journal, turning to face her. "I'm sorry I wasn't there either. Sorry I ignored her calls. Sorry I was too busy building an empire to answer when she needed me. Sorry I let guilt keep me from living for 8 years." The confessions hung between them. Two people destroyed by the same loss, finally admitting it out loud. "Rebecca wouldn't want this," Bridget said. "Us trapped in guilt, punishing ourselves." "No. She'd want us to be happy. Problem is, I don't know how." "Neither do I." They stared at each other, rain pounding windows, years of loneliness and watching and wanting combusting into something neither could name. Bridget moved first, hand cupping Dominic's face, wiping tears he'd never let fall before. "Rebecca loved you. She wouldn't want—" He kissed her mid-sentence. Desperate and seeking, 8 years of grief and loneliness and watching from afar released in one moment. She responded with matching hunger, fingers in his hair, his hands spanning her waist, pulling her onto his lap. "Tell me to stop," he breathed against her mouth. "Don't you dare," she answered, pulling him closer. "Have you ever taken a risk that terrified you? When did fear of being hurt stop being stronger than the need to be seen?" They moved to his bedroom, journals forgotten, leaving Rebecca's ghost behind to find something living. Clothes scattered in the hallway, urgency mixing with reverence, both needing this connection more than air. Dominic paused at his bedroom door, eyes searching hers. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." He lifted her, carrying her to the bed with careful intensity. When he laid her down, his hands shook. "I don't want to rush this," he said. "Don't want to mess it up." Bridget pulled him down. "Then we'll mess it up together." They learned each other slowly, despite the urgency, his hands memorizing curves, asking permission with every touch, her guiding him, showing him what Preston never learned, that she had a voice, desires, agency. "Is this okay?" he whispered against her collarbone. "Yes." "And this?" "God, yes." They moved together, hesitant, then confident, grief transforming into connection. Both understanding this changed everything. His whispered confession against her skin. "I don't know how to do this without screwing it up." Her reply, breathless and honest. "Then we'll screw it up together." After they lay tangled in sheets, rain softening outside, both afraid to speak and break whatever spell they'd created. "That wasn't in the contract," Dominic finally said. Bridget laughed against his chest. "No, it definitely wasn't. We should talk about— Not yet. Can we just have this? Just tonight, no complications, no questions, just us?" He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her hair. Just us. They fell asleep like that, two broken people finding something whole in each other's arms. Morning came harsh and bright. Bridget woke alone, hearing the shower running. When Dominic emerged, he was already dressed for work, walls reconstructed, distance reestablished. "Last night was a mistake," he said without looking at her. The words hit like a slap. Bridget sat up, pulling the sheet around her. "Don't! The contract specified—" "Screw the contract! You think I let you touch me because of paperwork? I let you in because I'm tired of being afraid. And I'm tired of losing people." Dominic's control finally cracked. "Everyone I love dies or leaves or disappears. My father, Rebecca, my mother checked out emotionally years ago. I built this life, these walls, this control specifically so I wouldn't have to feel this again." "Feel what?" "This," he gestured between them. "Wanting someone, needing them, giving them the power to destroy me." Bridget climbed out of bed, wrapped in his sheet, furious and heartbroken. "So what? You just run? Pretend last night didn't happen?" "It's safer." "For who? You. What about me?" "You're safer too. 3 months. The contract ends. We both walk away clean." "I don't want clean." Bridget was crying now, angry tears. "I spent 7 years in a marriage where love meant control, where intimacy was transaction. Last night was the first time I felt like myself in bed with someone. The first time I wasn't performing or surviving. And you're going to cheapen that by calling it a mistake?" Dominic's expression was agony. "I'm trying to protect you." "From what?" "From me. From this. From me inevitably failing you the way I failed everyone else." "You can't fail someone who chooses you with open eyes. That's not how this works." "Isn't it?" His voice was quiet now, defeated. "My grandmother's right. I'm my father's son. I know business, control, success. I don't know how to do this. Relationship, vulnerability, letting someone matter. I'll hurt you eventually." "Better now than later." "That's not your choice to make." "Yes, it is." Bridget stared at him, this man she'd started to love, watching him retreat behind walls she couldn't climb. "Fine. You want to run? Run. But when you're done being scared, when you're ready to admit that last night meant something, I'll be here. Because unlike you, I'm not afraid of wanting something real." She left, slamming the bedroom door, leaving Dominic alone with his fear and his control and the ghost of something he'd just destroyed to keep safe. Ashford Industries board meetings weren't designed for chemistry, but when Bridget walked into that conference room with her photography portfolio, Dominic's empire suddenly felt incomplete without her in it. 4 days of silence stretched between them. Dominic threw himself into work, staying late, leaving early, avoiding the penthouse where Bridget's presence made his control impossible. Bridget threw herself into photography, rebuilding her portfolio, planning the studio his contract promised, pretending her heart wasn't breaking. Then Eleanor intervened. "Dominic, I'm sitting in on the rebrand meeting today," she announced over the phone. "Gran, you haven't attended a meeting in 5 years." "Well, I'm attending this one. And bring your fiancé. Her artistic eye might be valuable." "That's not— See you at 2. She hung up, which is how Bridget found herself in Ashford Industries' 40th floor boardroom, surrounded by executives in suits worth more than her car, presenting ideas she'd thrown together in 3 hours. The 40th floor boardroom stretched glass and ambition, Atlanta sprawling below like a conquest already won. But every executive's eyes followed Bridget as she presented, her photography transforming Ashford Industries' corporate sterility into human connection. Employees as people, not assets. Stories instead of statistics. Our current branding focuses on innovation and success, Bridget explained, displaying her photos on the conference screen. But it's cold, impersonal. These images show the humans behind the technology, the single mom coding in the break room, the veteran finding purpose in cybersecurity, the immigrant building a future. This is Ashford Industries, not just what you create, but who you empower. Silence. Then the CFO leaned forward. This is different. Good different or bad different? Bridget asked. Effective different. How soon can you deliver a full campaign? Bridget glanced at Dominic, who'd been silent throughout her presentation. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes burned. 2 weeks for concepts, 6 for full rollout. Hire her, the CFO said to Dominic. Whatever it costs. This is what we've been missing. After in Dominic's office, tension crackled between them. You were incredible, he said. Don't. Bridget, I don't want your professional compliments. Either you meant what you said, that this is a mistake, or you didn't, but you don't get both. Dominic locked his office door, crossed to where she stood by the windows, backed her against the glass. You want to know the truth? Every morning I wake up and convince myself staying away from you is right, noble, safe. His hand came up to cup her face. Then I see you, and every logical reason disappears. So what are you going to do about it? This. He kissed her hard, urgent, no hesitation. Bridget responded instantly, arms around his neck, body pressed against his, 8 days of tension exploding between them. We're in your office, she gasped when they broke for air. I own the building. That's terrible ethics. I know. He kissed her again, slower this time. Thorough. But I can't stay away from you. I tried. I failed. Good. They spent the next hour proving that glass walls and unlocked doors weren't enough to stop them, that want trumped logic, that sometimes the risk was worth taking. After straightening clothes and catching breath, Bridget said, We need rules. Such as? Honesty. No more running when things get intense. We talk, even when it's hard. Agreed. What else? Therapy. Both of us. I have PTSD from Preston. You have unprocessed grief from Rebecca. We can't build something healthy on broken foundations. Dominic pulled her close. You're right. What else? We stop pretending this is just 3 months. Either we're doing this for real or we end it now. I can't do halfway. Neither can I. He kissed her forehead. So we're doing this. For real. For real. The relief was physical, overwhelming. Then Dominic's assistant buzzed. Mr. Ashford, there's a Preston Whitmore here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment but says it's urgent. Bridget froze. Dominic's expression went dark. Send him away. He says he'll wait. He's very insistent. Dominic looked at Bridget. Your call. We can have security remove him or we can face him together. Bridget straightened her spine. Together. They met Preston in the lobby. He looked tired, older, like the past months had worn him down. I'm in therapy, he said without preamble. AA, working on myself, I wanted to apologize properly. Bridget crossed her arms. I appreciate that. For you, not for me. I've moved on. Have you? Or did you just trade one cage for another? Preston's eyes flicked to Dominic. He'll hurt you eventually. Rich men like him are nothing like you, Bridget interrupted. The difference? He sees me as equal, not possession. He grows when I challenge him, doesn't shrink me to feel big. That's what you never understood. Love isn't about ownership. Preston's face hardened. You'll regret this. No, Bridget said calmly. The only thing I regret is not leaving sooner. Security escorted Preston out. Bridget was shaking but standing tall. "You okay?" Dominic asked. "Yeah, I really am." "What does healthy love look like to you after experiencing toxic relationships? How do you recognize the difference?" That night, Bridget showed Dominic the pregnancy test. 2 lines, clear as day. "I'm late," she said, voice shaking. 3 weeks late. "I took this an hour ago." Dominic stared at the test, then at her, expressions cycling through shock, fear, and finally, unmistakable joy. "We're having a baby!" "We're having a baby," Bridget confirmed. "I know this wasn't part of the plan." He kissed her, cutting off the apology. "Plans change. This is better." "You're not scared?" "Terrified, but also happy. Is that okay?" "It's more than okay." They held each other, 2 broken people creating something new, something whole, something that proved second chances were real if you were brave enough to take them. Their engagement party glittered with Atlanta's elite toasting a love story, while Preston waited in the shadows with papers that could incinerate it all. The Atlanta History Center gardens bloomed unseasonably warm for November, string lights weaving through old oaks, 500 guests witnessing Dominic and Bridget's carefully choreographed love story become improvised truth. She wore ivory silk that caught moonlight, his hand never leaving her waist, both acutely aware this was their last performance, or their first real beginning. Bridget was 3 months pregnant now, barely showing, their secret safe beneath designer fabric. They'd agreed to announce after the party, after Dominic secured his inheritance, after the chaos settled. But chaos doesn't wait for permission. "You're glowing," Eleanor said, pulling Bridget aside during cocktail hour. "Pregnancy suits you." Bridget's eyes went wide. "How did you—" "I'm 83. I've seen enough pregnant women to recognize the signs. Does he know?" "Yes. We're waiting to announce." Eleanor's smile was warm. "Rebecca would be thrilled. She always said you'd make a wonderful mother." The words hit hard. Bridget blinked back tears. "I wish she was here." "She is. In every good decision you make. In every moment you choose courage over fear." Eleanor squeezed her hand. "Now go. Your fiancé is looking for you, and I believe it's toast time." Dominic found her near the rose garden, pulling her close. "Ready for this?" "Ready as I'll ever be." They returned to the main pavilion where guests gathered, champagne glasses raised, waiting for the couple of honor to speak. Dominic took the microphone first. "Thank you all for celebrating with us tonight. Most of you know I'm not one for public emotion. I prefer spreadsheets to speeches, data to declarations." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "But Bridget changed that. She walked into my life when I wasn't looking, challenged everything I thought I knew about control and safety and what it means to really live. She taught me that the best things in life can't be planned or predicted. They can only be embraced. So here's to embracing the unexpected." Applause erupted. Bridget's eyes filled with tears as Dominic handed her the microphone. "I'm not good at this either," she admitted, voice shaking. "For a long time, I thought love meant making yourself smaller, quieter, less. I thought survival was the best I could hope for." Then Dominic showed me the difference between surviving and thriving, between control and care, between possession and partnership. He didn't rescue me. He reminded me I could rescue myself. That's the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. More applause. Dominic pulled her in for a kiss that was supposed to be brief, but lasted long enough to make people cheer. Then Preston's voice cut through the celebration. "How touching. Too bad it's all fraud." The crowd parted. Preston stood near the entrance, his lawyer beside him, both holding folders that promised destruction. Dominic's entire body went rigid. "Security!" "Wait," Preston's lawyer interrupted. "We have evidence. This entire engagement is a business arrangement, contract marriage designed to secure inheritance. Timeline proving premeditation from the day Mrs. Callahan's divorce finalized." Whispers exploded through the crowd. Cameras appeared, because of course someone was filming. This was Atlanta society. Scandal was currency. Bridget felt her heart hammering. This was it. The moment Preston destroyed everything. But Dominic didn't flinch. "You're right," he said calmly, voice carrying across the stunned silence. "There was a contract, 3 months, business arrangement, everything you said." Bridget's stomach dropped. What was he doing? "But here's what you don't understand, Preston." Dominic turned to Bridget, taking her hands. "Contracts cover terms. They don't cover falling in love. They don't cover waking up and realizing the person sleeping down the hall is the first thing you think about every morning. They don't cover the moment when pretending becomes real and you stop caring about timelines because you've already decided forever." He pulled a paper from his jacket. The contract. Ripped it in half. "That was the arrangement. This is the reality. Bridget isn't my solution to a problem. She's not a business deal or a convenient fiancée. She's the woman I love, the woman carrying my child, the woman I'm choosing every single day, not because I have to, but because I want to." The crowd gasped. Bridget was crying openly now. Preston's face went red. "This is still fraud." "Is it?" Eleanor stepped forward, regal and unbothered. "My will requires genuine marriage. It doesn't specify how that marriage begins. Plenty of relationships start transactional and become real. This is one of them." She turned to the crowd. "I've watched my grandson fall in love over the past 3 months. Watched him become human again. Watched this remarkable woman heal him in ways therapy never could. If you call that fraud, you don't understand what marriage actually is." Dominic's lawyer appeared from the crowd. Janet Rodriguez, the same woman who'd handled Bridget's divorce. "Mr. Whitmore, I have documentation of your harassment campaign against Mrs. Callahan. Violated restraining orders, threats, attempted intimidation. If you don't leave immediately, I'm filing criminal charges. Security already has your previous violations on file." Preston looked between them, calculation warring with rage. He'd expected to destroy them. Instead, he'd handed them a moment to declare something real. "This isn't over," he said, but the threat sounded hollow. "Yes, it is." Dominic's voice was final. "Security, escort Mr. Whitmore out. If he returns, call the police." As guards led Preston away, his threats echoing across manicured lawns, the crowd erupted in applause. Not for the drama, though Atlanta society loved drama, but for the raw honesty they'd just witnessed. Dominic turned to Bridget, ignoring 500 witnesses, and kissed her like she was oxygen. "Have you ever faced down someone who tried to destroy you? What did you say when you finally found your voice?" When they broke apart, Eleanor was crying, guests were cheering, and Bridget realized something profound. This wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. "That contract we signed?" Dominic whispered against her ear. "I want to tear it up, not to end this, to start it real. No timeline, no conditions, just us figuring this out." Bridget's eyes filled. "What if we fail? What if we don't?" Before she could answer, Eleanor tapped her champagne glass, commanding attention. "Well, since we're all here and emotions are running high, let's make it official tonight. I have a judge on standby. Why wait when you've already decided?" The crowd erupted in excited murmurs. Bridget looked at Dominic, panic and joy warring. "Are we really doing this?" she asked. "Only if you want to." "I want to." "Then let's do this." Within 20 minutes, the garden transformed. The judge appeared, an old family friend. The string quartet shifted to wedding march. Eleanor produced rings from somewhere. 500 witnesses rearranged themselves from party to ceremony. And Bridget stood there, in her ivory dress that was supposed to be for engagement photos, about to marry a man she'd known for 3 months and loved for longer than she'd admitted. "This is insane," she whispered to Dominic as they waited for the ceremony to start. Completely, he agreed. Want to run? Not even a little bit. Good, because I'm done running from things that scare me. Me too. The ceremony began. They planned 3 months of pretend. Instead, they got one night of forever, improvised in a garden with 500 witnesses and zero idea what they were doing. The judge was kind, older, someone who'd known the Ashford family for decades. She smiled at Bridget with understanding. I've married hundreds of couples, rich ones, poor ones, young ones, old ones. You know what separates the ones who last? They choose each other even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Are you both ready to choose hard? Yes, they said together. Then let's begin. The ceremony was surreal. String lights glowing above, autumn air carrying the scent of night-blooming flowers, 500 people bearing witness to something that started as transaction and became truth. When it came time for vows, the judge offered traditional words. Dominic shook his head. Can we write our own, right now? The judge smiled. Of course. Dominic turned to Bridget. No script, no plan, just raw honesty. I spent 8 years watching you from a distance, keeping a promise to someone we both loved. I told myself it was duty, obligation, a way to honor Rebecca's memory. Truth is, I was afraid that getting close meant losing again, that feeling anything meant pain, that vulnerability was weakness. You taught me that living afraid isn't living at all. His voice cracked. He didn't hide it. I don't have pretty words or romantic speeches. I'm better with numbers than emotions, spreadsheets than sentiments. But I have this. I choose you. Every day, every way, every version of you that exists. The broken parts, the healing parts, the parts still figuring it out. The woman who rearranges my furniture and sings off-key in the shower and makes my sterile penthouse feel like home. The mother of my child, my partner, my wife, all of it, all of you. Bridget was sobbing, happy tears mixing with overwhelmed tears, mixing with can't believe this is happening tears. Her turn. Preston convinced me my dreams were negotiable, my voice was noise, my worth was conditional. He spent 7 years teaching me that love meant making yourself small, that asking for needs was selfish, that survival was the best I could hope for. She looked at Dominic, really looked at him, this man who'd been watching from shadows, building escape routes, waiting for her to be ready. You showed me I was wrong. Not by telling me, but by seeing me when I was invisible to myself, by protecting without controlling, by giving me space to heal without rushing me to be whole. This terrifies me. Marriage, vulnerability, trusting someone with the parts of me that barely survived last time. Her voice strengthened. But I'm done letting fear make my choices. So I'm choosing you, choosing us, choosing to believe that love doesn't have to hurt, control doesn't have to masquerade as care, and second chances exist for people brave enough to take them. I choose you, Dominic, not because you saved me, because you reminded me I could save myself. And then you asked if you could stand beside me while I did. There wasn't a dry eye in the audience. The judge cleared her throat, emotional herself. By the power vested in me by the state of Georgia, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss, though I suspect you don't need permission. Dominic pulled Bridget close, kissing her like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. Because maybe he had been. The crowd erupted. Applause, cheers, some crying. Atlanta society loved nothing more than unexpected romance. When they finally broke apart, Bridget laughed against his mouth. We just impulsively married. My grandmother planned this, Dominic admitted. The lawsuit threat, the timing, the judge on standby. She orchestrated Preston's crash to force my hand. Bridget pulled back. You knew? I suspected. I married you anyway. Does that change things? Bridget considered. Eleanor manipulating events, Dominic possibly knowing, the whole elaborate setup to push them towards something real. No, she decided, because whatever brought us here, we chose this, right now, no contract, no conditions, just us. Just us, he agreed. The reception continued, transformed from engagement party to wedding celebration. They danced as husband and wife, Bridget's hand on her barely there bump, Dominic's arms around her waist, both giddy with risk and freedom and the terrifying joy of jumping without a net. What vows would you write with no preparation, just truth? Share what commitment means to you. Hours later, their wedding suite glowed soft in hotel lamplight. The Ritz-Carlton had provided their finest room, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Atlanta, king bed covered in rose petals someone had scattered, champagne neither of them would drink because pregnancy. "We're married," Bridget said, still processing. "We're married," Dominic confirmed, loosening his tie. "And having a baby. And having a baby. This is crazy. Completely." He pulled her close. "Any regrets?" "None." "You?" "Not one." They undressed each other slowly, years of tension finally unleashed without contracts or conditions. His reverence as he traced her body, whispering "my wife" like a prayer. Her response, breathless and certain, "my husband." They made love until dawn broke over Atlanta, sealing vows with bodies and trust, both understanding this was different from before, no fear of consequences. No wondering what came next. Just them, committed and certain and finally free to want each other completely. After, tangled in expensive sheets, Bridget's head on his chest, his hand protective over her growing belly, they talked about futures that felt possible instead of terrifying. "What do we name her?" Dominic asked. "If it's a girl?" Bridget had been thinking about this. "Rebecca Eleanor Ashford, if you're ready." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I'm ready to stop surviving and start living. With you. With her. With all of it." "Me too." Morning brought coffee in bed, room service pancakes, Dominic's shirt on Bridget's frame, his ring on her finger that wasn't coming off. They lounged like people with nowhere to be, though responsibilities waited below. "We just impulsively married," Bridget said again, laughing. "My grandmother planned this," Dominic reminded her. "I know. The lawsuit threat, the timing. She orchestrated Preston's crash to force your hand." "You knew." "I suspected. I married you anyway." He pulled her close. "Best decision I ever made." Same. They stayed in that room until checkout forced them back to reality. But reality didn't feel scary anymore. It felt like possibility. Real marriage doesn't come with instruction manuals. They learned that when Bridget's trauma responses collided with Dominic's control issues, and neither knew how to fight fair. The first month of marriage was adjustment, learning to share space as spouses instead of roommates. Navigating intimacy as pregnancy made Bridget's body foreign to herself. Figuring out how to be partners when both were used to surviving alone. November rain turned Atlanta gray. Their penthouse cocoon feeling smaller as reality settled in. Marriage wasn't just passion and vows, it was dishes and decisions, triggers and patience, learning to exist in the same space when fairy tales faded into everyday. Bridget's PTSD surfaced in unexpected ways, flinching when Dominic moved too quickly. Panic attacks when he raised his voice during work calls, flashbacks during intimacy that left her shaking and apologizing. "I'm sorry," she'd whisper after freezing mid-kiss, Preston's voice in her head saying terrible things. Dominic would hold her, patient and aching. "We go at your speed, always. You're safe here, I promise." The patience helped. Slowly, Bridget's body remembered it belonged to her. That intimacy could be healing instead of harmful. That desire without fear was possible, but Dominic had his own issues. One afternoon, Bridget went to lunch with old photography friends without telling him. When she returned, he was pacing, phone in hand, barely controlled panic on his face. "Where were you?" "Lunch. With friends. I texted you. 3 hours ago. You didn't respond after that. I called 4 times. My phone died. I'm sorry, I didn't think... You didn't think I'd worry? After everything with Preston? After... He stopped himself, took a breath. I had your phone tracked. Bridget went cold. You what? There's an app for emergencies. I installed it weeks ago, without asking. For your safety. This is exactly what Preston did. Bridget's voice shook. Monitoring, controlling, deciding what I can handle. That's not fair. I'm nothing like him. Then why does this feel the same? You can't protect me from everything. I can try. I lost Rebecca because I wasn't paying attention. I'm not Rebecca. Bridget was yelling now, months of buried feelings exploding. I'm not your second chance at saving your sister. I'm your wife, and I need you to trust that I can handle my own life. The words hit like physical blows. Dominic stepped back, expression cracking. You're right. God, you're right. He sat heavily on the couch, head in hands. I don't know how to do this. How to care without controlling. How to worry without suffocating. How to love you without trying to keep you in a box where nothing bad can happen. Bridget's anger deflated. She sat beside him, not touching, both raw and exposed. I don't know how to receive care without feeling trapped, she admitted. How to accept worry without interpreting it as control. How to love you without waiting for the other shoe to drop. They sat in heavy silence, their first real fight laying bare all the wounds they'd been avoiding. We need help, Bridget finally said. Therapy, both of us, because I love you, but I can't do this if you're going to track my phone and panic every time I'm late, and you can't do this if I'm going to flinch every time you try to care. You're right. Dominic deleted the tracking app in front of her. I'm sorry. That was wrong. I was scared, but that doesn't justify invading your privacy. Thank you. Bridget took his hand. And I'm sorry I didn't think about how my silence would affect you. I should have found a charger, should have checked in. Your fear isn't irrational, it's trauma. Just like mine. So we both need therapy. We both need therapy. How do you differentiate care from control in relationships? What boundaries matter most to you? Dominic stood, pulling her up with him. I'm going for a walk. I need to clear my head. Is that okay? Or do you need me to stay? The question, the fact that he asked instead of assuming, meant everything. Go. I'll be here when you get back. He kissed her forehead. I love you, even when I'm terrible at showing it. I love you too, even when I'm terrible at receiving it. He left. Bridget sat alone, processing, until Eleanor showed up an hour later with tea and wisdom. That boy spent 8 years confusing protection with prevention, Eleanor said, settling beside her. Preventing loss by preventing attachment, you're teaching him the difference. It's messy work. What if I can't? What if his fear and my trauma are too much? Then you'll figure it out together. That's what marriage is, staying when it's hard, working through instead of running away. Preston never worked through anything. He just blamed me. Dominic isn't Preston. But you'll have moments where old patterns resurface. The difference is choosing to see them, name them, and do better, both of you. When Dominic returned at midnight, soaked from rain he'd walked through for hours, Bridget was waiting. I deleted the tracking app, he said again. I'm sorry. I'm terrified of losing you, but I'm more terrified of becoming someone you need to escape. Bridget pulled him inside, grabbed towels, started drying his hair like he couldn't do it himself. Then we need rules. Therapy, both of us. Learning to fight without running. Can you do that? I'll try every day. That's all I need. Their first kiss after fighting tasted like relief and commitment, sweeter than the easy ones. Because easy doesn't build foundation. Hard does. And they were finally willing to do the hard work. They say marriage is work. They don't tell you it's also choosing that work every morning, choosing each other through therapy sessions and triggered moments and the slow, unglamorous labor of healing together. 6 months into marriage, things looked different. Bridget's photography studio opened in Castleberry Hill, renovated warehouse with exposed brick, natural light pouring through industrial windows, walls lined with her photographs, telling stories of survival and strength. Each image a reclamation of the art Preston tried to kill. Spring transformed Atlanta into blooming chaos, azaleas exploding pink and purple, the city alive with possibility. Bridget's belly was unmistakable now. 7 months pregnant and glowing, moving through her studio space with ownership she'd never felt before. The opening was packed. Local artists, business owners, families who'd heard about her domestic violence advocacy work. Because Bridget wasn't just doing portraits, she was documenting stories of women rebuilding after abuse, creating visual testimony that others weren't alone. Dominic stood back, watching her navigate the crowd, pride overwhelming him. This was the woman Rebecca loved, the artist who'd been buried under Preston's control, finally free, finally thriving. "She's remarkable," Eleanor said beside him. "She is. So are you. For letting her shine instead of trying to dim her brightness. I'm learning. You're succeeding." Their couples therapy helped. Weekly sessions where they unpacked trauma, learned communication tools, practiced fighting fair. Their therapist, Dr. Chen, was patient, insightful, unafraid to call them out. Dominic, what does protection look like without control? He'd struggled with that question for weeks. Finally answered, giving her tools and stepping back, being available without hovering, trusting she'll ask if she needs help. Bridget, what does trust look like after betrayal? Her answer came easier now than months ago. Believing his actions match his words, giving him chances to prove he's different, forgiving mistakes without forgetting patterns. They weren't perfect. Dominic still struggled with anxiety when Bridget was late. Bridget still flinched during arguments, but they were better, conscious, trying. The studio's back office became their private space. After the opening crowd thinned, Dominic found Bridget there, exhausted and happy, feet propped up because pregnancy made standing painful. "You did amazing," he said. "We did amazing. None of this happens without your support." "Our support? We're partners, remember?" She pulled him down for a kiss, slow, deep, grateful. "I love you. I love you too." Their intimacy had evolved, less frantic now, more comfortable. They'd learned each other's bodies, triggers, preferences, knew when passion was needed and when gentleness mattered. When Bridget's changing body made her self-conscious, Dominic worshipped every curve. "You're creating life," he'd whisper against her skin. "You're magnificent." Making love in the studio that night, surrounded by Bridget's photographs, both felt the weight of how far they'd come. From courthouse steps to this moment, married, expecting, building something real. But peace never lasts forever. Preston showed up at the studio opening. Sober this time, genuinely apologetic, but still unwelcome. "I'm in therapy," he said when he cornered Bridget near the bathroom. "AA, working on myself. I wanted to apologize properly, for everything. You deserved better." Bridget studied him, saw genuine remorse, still didn't care. "I appreciate that. For you, not for me. I hope you get healthy. But I've moved on, Preston, completely. What we had is dead. Let it stay buried." "He treats you well, Ashford?" "He treats me as an equal, as a partner, as someone whose dreams matter as much as his." "That's what you never understood. Love isn't about ownership. It's about seeing someone completely and choosing them anyway." Preston nodded slowly. "I'm glad you found that. I mean it. I hope you find it too." Someday, when you're healthy enough to offer it. He left peacefully. No threats, no drama, just a man facing consequences and trying to be better. Dominic appeared immediately after, protective energy radiating. You okay? Yeah, I really am. What did he want? To apologize, to make peace. I think he meant it. Do you want to give him another chance? God, no. Bridget laughed. But I want him to heal, not for my sake, for whoever comes next in his life. Everyone deserves a chance to be better. Dominic pulled her close, hand protective over her belly. You're a better person than I am. No, I'm just tired of carrying anger. It's heavy. I want to put it down. What does healthy love look like to you after experiencing toxic relationships? How do you recognize the difference? That night, Bridget woke Dominic at 2 a.m., hand on her stomach, eyes wide. Something's wrong. The drive to the hospital was terror. Too early, 7 months, not full term, baby too small, too fragile. Dominic held her hand while driving too fast, calling ahead, both praying to gods they weren't sure they believed in. The ER moved quickly. Monitors, tests, worried faces. Preterm labor, contractions starting. Baby's heartbeat strong but stressed. We're going to try to stop it, the doctor said. Give her more time to develop, but if we can't, we'll deliver tonight. Are you prepared for NICU? Possible complications? They weren't. How could anyone be prepared? But Dominic took Bridget's hand, voice steady despite fear. We'll handle whatever comes. The medication worked. Contractions stopped. Baby's heartbeat stabilized. But Bridget was on bed rest for the remainder of pregnancy. High risk, monitored constantly. I can't lose her, Bridget whispered in the hospital room, hands on her belly. You won't. She's a fighter, like her mother. What if something goes wrong? What if... Then we face it together. But right now she's okay. You're okay. Focus on that. Bridget did. Focused on the strong heartbeat on monitors, the baby moving inside her, the man beside her who'd promised to stay through everything. They went home after 3 days. The studio closed temporarily. Bridget's world shrunk to their penthouse, doctor's appointments, and waiting. But she wasn't alone. Dominic worked from home. Eleanor visited daily. Friends brought food, company, normalcy. And slowly, pregnancy progressed. 7 months became 8. 8 became 8.5. At 9 months, 2 weeks past the scare, Bridget's water broke at 3 a.m. It's time, she said, waking Dominic. He was up instantly, hospital bag already packed, car keys ready. Let's go meet our daughter. 2 years ago, Bridget collapsed on courthouse steps, broken and desperate. Today, she stood in that same spot, belly round with life, photographing a domestic violence resource center opening. This time, not as victim, but as survivor who chose to thrive. But first, the birth. Labor was brutal. 17 hours of contractions, epidurals that only half worked, Dominic coaching breathing while battling his own panic. The same hospital where Rebecca died years ago. His fear a living thing. I can't lose you, he whispered during hour 12, Bridget squeezing his hand hard enough to hurt. You won't. She gasped through another contraction. But if something goes wrong, nothing will... Listen, if something goes wrong, you raise our daughter knowing love doesn't guarantee safety, but it's worth the risk anyway. That's what we'd want her to learn. He kissed her forehead, tears streaming. Nothing's going wrong. You're both going to be fine. He was right. At 3:47 p.m. on a Thursday in March, Rebecca Eleanor Ashford entered the world screaming, healthy and perfect, and already demanding attention. She looks like you, Dominic said, crying openly as nurses placed their daughter on Bridget's chest. She has your eyes, Bridget said, crying too, hands gentle on impossibly small back. Rebecca Eleanor, 8 pounds, 20 inches, lungs that could wake the dead. Perfect. They stayed like that for an hour, just the three of them, building family in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and possibility. Recovery was hard. Bridget's body needed weeks to heal. Breastfeeding hurt, sleep became mythical. But they navigated it together. Dominic changing diapers at 2 a.m., Bridget pumping while he rocked their daughter, both operating on love and caffeine. Eleanor visited constantly, falling completely in love with her great-granddaughter. Rebecca would be so proud, she said, holding the baby who shared her name, of both of you, for choosing each other, for choosing love after loss, for building this. 6 weeks postpartum, Bridget stood in front of a mirror, body different in ways she was still learning to accept. Softer, rounder, marked by pregnancy and birth. Dominic appeared behind her, hands gentle on her waist. You're beautiful. I'm different. You're magnificent. You created life, our daughter. How could that be anything but beautiful? They made love that night for the first time since birth. Slow, tentative, reconnecting in ways that felt both familiar and new. Her body different, his worship unchanged. The maturity of their physical relationship, comfort and passion coexisting, healing complete enough to build pleasure without fear. I love you, she whispered. I love you too. Their daughter cried from the nursery, interrupting the moment. They laughed, getting dressed, returning to the chaos of new parenthood. This was their life now. Messy, exhausting, perfect. Months passed. Rebecca Eleanor grew, meeting milestones, filling their penthouse with noise and joy. Bridget's studio reopened, this time with childcare space for working mothers. Dominic cut back hours, prioritizing family over empire. They learned to be parents together, stumbling through diaper blowouts and sleep regressions and the overwhelming love that made everything else irrelevant. On their second wedding anniversary, they returned to Davidson County Courthouse. The steps looked the same: white stone, Tennessee sun, tourists snapping photos, but everything else was different. Bridget stood strong, 1-year-old daughter on her hip, camera in her free hand, photographing the ribbon cutting for the Rebecca Ashford Center for Women's Independence. Her photography book, After Stories of Survival, displayed inside, telling stories that proved healing was possible. 2 years ago, I collapsed on these steps, Bridget said during the dedication speech, voice steady. Broken, desperate, convinced survival was the best I could hope for. Today, I'm standing here with my daughter, my husband, my art, my purpose. Not because someone rescued me, though Dominic certainly tried, but because I learned the difference between surviving and thriving. She looked at Dominic, holding their daughter now, both watching with love clear on their faces. This center represents that difference. It's not charity, it's justice. It's what happens when we refuse to accept that some lives matter less than others, when we give women tools instead of pity, support instead of judgment, possibility instead of prison. Applause erupted. The center opened, serving its first clients, women Bridget recognized herself in, women beginning journeys she'd already traveled. After, they took anniversary photos on the courthouse steps, the place where everything ended, the place where everything began. Renew your vows, Eleanor suggested, appearing with a minister friend. Do it properly this time, not rushed, not improvised, intentional. So they did. On the courthouse steps, surrounded by family and friends and the women from the center, Bridget and Dominic renewed vows they'd first spoken in a garden under pressure. This time was different. 2 years ago, I caught you on these steps, Dominic said. 1 year ago, we impulsively married. Today, I'm asking again, not because we have to, but because I choose to. Every day, every version, all of it. Bridget's tears were happy ones. I'm choosing too. Not survival this time. I'm choosing joy, choosing us. choosing to believe happy endings exist for people brave enough to fight for them. They kissed as husband and wife again, their daughter laughing between them, the future spread ahead like possibility instead of threat. What would your life look like if you chose to thrive instead of just survive? What's one step you could take today toward that version of yourself? Share your dreams below. You never know who needs to hear them. That night, after putting Rebecca Eleanor to bed, they sat on their balcony overlooking Atlanta. The city that witnessed their transformation spread below, lights twinkling like promises kept. "I never thought I'd get this," Bridget said, leaning into Dominic's warmth. "Family, art, love that doesn't hurt, purpose, peace." "Me neither. I thought control was the answer. Turned out surrender was..." "Surrender? To possibility, to risk, to you." He kissed her temple. "Best surrender of my life." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd found each other in grief and built something living from the ashes. Inside, their daughter slept peacefully, named for a woman who believed in second chances. Outside, the city breathed and moved and lived, and Bridget realized with perfect clarity she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving, and it was worth every terrifying, beautiful, impossible step it took to get here. If this story reminded you that healing is possible, that love can exist without control, that your past doesn't define your future, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories that prove survival is just the beginning. Thriving is the goal. Drop a comment sharing one thing you're reclaiming in your own life. One dream you're finally brave enough to chase. One person you're choosing to become. And remember, the woman who collapsed on those courthouse steps couldn't imagine the life waiting on the other side of fear. Neither can you, but it's there, waiting for you to be ready.